A police officer in Seattle thought he had seen it all: crime, chaos, and the kind of heartbreak that leaves a man hollow. But one cold December night, while working security at a glittering charity gala, Officer Ethan Walker and his loyal German shepherd, Rex, crossed paths with a silent little girl in a wheelchair and a mother who had forgotten how to believe in miracles. What began as a simple gesture of kindness soon unraveled a hidden world of corruption, betrayal, and a family's buried pain. Yet through faith, courage, and the bond between a man, a child, and a dog, light began to pierce even the darkest storm. What happened next would prove that God's miracles don't always come with thunder. They come with love, loyalty, and the will to keep believing. Before we begin, tell me where you are watching from. Drop your country in the comments so we can see how far this story travels. And if you believe that hope can still be found in the darkest night, hit that subscribe button, because what you're about to hear may restore your faith in family, forgiveness, and the quiet power of grace. Seattle in December was a city drenched in silver. Rain streamed from the gray heavens like endless threads of silk, turning the streets into mirrors that reflected the restless glow of neon lights. The air smelled of wet pine and diesel, a reminder that even beauty here came with a weight. Inside the Seattle Art Museum, however, the world glittered. Chandeliers shimmered above an ocean of tailored suits and sequined gowns, laughter chimed against the marble, and a soft jazz trio played near the grand staircase. Tonight was the Reynolds Robotics Charity Gala, a night meant to showcase compassion, innovation, and power. Ethan Walker stood near the rear entrance, scanning the crowd with a quiet, disciplined gaze. He was 36, tall and broad-shouldered, the kind of man whose presence carried a calm gravity that made others instinctively step aside. His short brown hair bore a few streaks of silver near the temples, souvenirs from years of service. His hazel eyes, steady yet heavy with memory, rarely lingered on luxury. He wore his Navy police uniform neatly pressed beneath his black winter coat. Ethan was a Seattle police officer, once part of the department's high-risk rescue and hostage negotiation unit, before tragedy forced him to step away. After losing his wife in a home invasion gone wrong, he had chosen a quieter life, taking on security and community outreach duties. Beside him sat Rex, his German shepherd partner. 6 years old, Rex was a muscular and intelligent dog with a thick coat of black and tan fur that gleamed under the museum's golden lights. His amber eyes held the watchfulness of a soldier who'd seen too much. Once a canine officer trained for urban rescues, Rex had saved Ethan's life during a building explosion that left the dog limping slightly in his right hind leg. Since then, Ethan treated him as both partner and friend, a soul who, like him, carried invisible scars but kept moving forward. Across the marble floor, Clara Reynolds, the host of the gala, was a striking figure of control and poise. In her late 30s, she had a statuesque frame and ash-blonde hair swept into a polished bun. Her gray silk gown seemed tailored not just to her body, but to her ambition. As CEO of Reynolds Robotics, she commanded the tech empire with both brilliance and severity. Her emerald eyes betrayed no warmth. They had learned long ago that sympathy was a weakness. Once, she had been kind, full of optimism, but the last 2 years had hardened her. The car accident that took her husband's reputation and left her daughter paralyzed had also stripped away her belief in happy endings. Near Clara stood her daughter, Amelia Reynolds, 11 years old, delicate as porcelain. She sat in a wheelchair, her small hands resting lifelessly on her lap. Her hair was light brown, shoulder length, neatly brushed by her caretaker, yet her eyes, a pale, lost blue, stared through everything. Since the accident, she hadn't spoken a single word. Doctors said the paralysis was physical. Ethan, had he known her then, would have recognized it as something deeper, the paralysis of grief. And then there was Logan Pierce, Clara's ex-husband and one of the city's most influential businessmen. He was in his early 40s, tall and immaculately dressed in a charcoal suit that whispered money and control. His sharp features and slicked-back black hair gave him the polished look of a man who thrived on perception. Once a venture capitalist, now the chair of a powerful investment fund, Logan still carried the charm that once captivated Clara. But behind the charm was calculation. He had the smile of someone who could turn compassion into currency. Unknown to most, Logan had been quietly misusing his political connections, using the charitable wing of Reynolds Robotics as a front to launder campaign funds. To him, tonight's gala was less about helping children and more about protecting his empire. The room buzzed with applause as Logan took the stage to introduce the charity's goals. His voice was smooth, persuasive, confident. "Tonight, we celebrate innovation that gives hope to those who've lost it," he said. Cameras flashed. Clara forced a smile. Amelia looked down at her hands. And Ethan, from the edge of the hall, noted how perfectly the man performed, like a show he'd practiced 1,000 times. Then came the moment that changed everything. As the band began a slow waltz, couples filled the floor. A soft murmur rippled when Rex suddenly pricked his ears. His muscles tensed, his tail rose slightly. Ethan frowned. "Easy, boy," he murmured, but Rex's gaze was fixed on the little girl in the wheelchair. Without warning, he tugged the leash and trotted toward Amelia, stopping just before her chair. Gasps erupted across the hall. Ethan moved swiftly, apologetic. "Sorry, ma'am. He never does this." But before he could finish, Rex gently lowered his head onto Amelia's lap. For a heartbeat, the room went silent. Amelia blinked. Her thin fingers trembled, brushing against the dog's fur. A movement so small, yet to her mother, it was a miracle. Clara froze, disbelief turning her breath shallow. Then Ethan, realizing the crowd was still staring, offered a quiet smile and said softly, "Would you like to dance, miss?" The words were not meant literally, yet they rippled through the hall like a shockwave. The band faltered. The mayor's wife gasped audibly. Logan's face tightened, his eyes darting toward Clara, and Clara, always in control, lost her composure for the first time in years. "Officer, you are out of line," she snapped. "Remove that animal immediately." Ethan straightened, saluted slightly. "Yes, ma'am." He gently called Rex back, but not before the dog gave Amelia one last, almost human look. The look of a creature that understood pain too well. As they left the hall, Logan followed Ethan, with a measured smile. "Quite a performance, officer. You almost made me believe you were sincere." He extended his hand. Ethan hesitated before shaking it. The grip was firm, too firm, like a man marking territory. Logan leaned in. "Seattle doesn't need heroes, Mr. Walker. It already has owners." Then he turned and walked back into the light. Outside, the rain had eased into a cold drizzle. Ethan crouched beside Rex under the museum awning, scratching his ear. "You scared the whole city in there, buddy." Rex huffed, as if unapologetic. Ethan smiled faintly. "But maybe you saw something I didn't." He looked through the glass doors where the gala still shimmered with laughter and vanity. Behind that glass, a little girl had moved her hand for the first time. Inside the VIP lounge, Clara sat rigid, her champagne untouched. She kept replaying the moment in her mind, Amelia's hand trembling, Rex's gaze, the words, "Would you like to dance?" A part of her wanted to call the officer back. Another part whispered that hope was dangerous. Then Logan entered, loosened his tie, and poured himself a drink. His reflection shimmered in the glass window overlooking the rainy skyline. "It's amusing," he said casually, "how people still believe in miracles." Clara turned toward him, her voice sharp. "That dog made her move, Logan. I saw it." He shrugged. "Coincidence. Don't let a sentimental policeman get in your head." But as he said it, his phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen and stepped aside, lowering his voice. Clara caught only fragments. "Yes. Transfer the files tonight. Use the Foundation's account." When he turned back, his smile was smooth as ever. "Don't worry about Amelia," he said. "She's in good hands." Yet his reflection in the window wavered, distorted by the raindrops sliding down the glass, like a man whose soul was cracking under its own secrets. Outside, a police cruiser pulled away. Ethan looked once more toward the building. Something about the night felt unfinished, as though the city itself had inhaled and forgotten to exhale. And high above, the rain began again, steady and cold, washing the glass, but not the guilt. The rain had stopped by morning, but Seattle still wore its gray shroud like a memory it couldn't shake. Clouds hung low over the skyline, muting the world beneath. Ethan Walker sat in the precinct cafeteria, stirring his black coffee, though it had gone cold. Rex lay beside him, eyes half closed, the band of his canine collar catching the fluorescent light. The night before kept replaying in Ethan's mind, the way the little girl's fingers twitched, the way her mother's face cracked for a moment before the anger returned. He hadn't meant to cause trouble. He'd only followed instinct, or perhaps Rex had. Across from him, sat Captain Harold Simmons, a short, stocky man in his 50s, with salt and pepper hair and a perpetually furrowed brow. His blue uniform shirt was tight at the shoulders, his tie crooked, but there was a softness in his voice that only came from years of leading men who'd seen too much. Simmons had been Ethan's superior during the hostage unit days, the one who had watched him fall apart after his wife's death. "You caused quite a show last night," Simmons said quietly, flipping through a file. "The Reynolds Foundation called this morning. They're not happy." Ethan nodded without looking up. "I didn't mean for Rex to approach the girl. He just reacted." Simmons sighed. "That dog's got better instincts than half the department, but PR wants this smoothed over. You'll be on administrative leave for a week." Ethan didn't argue. He understood politics. Appearances mattered more than truth. He reached down and scratched Rex's ear. "Looks like vacation, buddy." The dog tilted his head as if unconvinced. That afternoon, as the city dripped with post-storm drizzle, a sleek black sedan stopped in front of Ethan's small apartment complex near Pike Place. Clara Reynolds stepped out, wrapped in a gray wool coat that contrasted with her ivory skin. Her hair, usually tied in a corporate knot, now fell loosely around her shoulders, a sign of restlessness. Her driver, a young man named Daniel Reyes, stayed by the car, a quiet figure with kind eyes and an army buzz cut, a veteran who now worked as her assistant. Ethan opened the door, surprised. Clara rarely left her fortress-like office. She stood in his doorway, poised but uneasy. "Officer Walker," she began, "I came to thank you for last night, and to ask you something." Her tone was professional, but the tremor in her voice betrayed something else. Curiosity wrapped in fear. Ethan stepped aside. "Come in. Coffee's terrible, but it's warm." She entered the modest apartment, walls lined with framed commendations and a few fading photos. Ethan with his late wife, smiling in uniform. Ethan holding a toddler, Sophie in front of a patrol car, Rex as a puppy, ears too big for his head. The place smelled faintly of cedar and dog fur. Clara glanced around, uncomfortable among memories that weren't hers. "Amelia moved her hand," she said softly. "The doctors said it was impossible, but it happened when your dog touched her. I saw it." Ethan nodded, expression neutral. "Sometimes trauma locks the body. Sometimes the right stimulus can unlock it." "You mean therapy?" "Not exactly. More like trust." He poured her coffee. "Your daughter doesn't need more machines or pity. She needs to feel safe again." Clara looked skeptical. Years of boardroom strategy had taught her to distrust simplicity. "Safe from what, officer?" "From whatever made her stop speaking," Ethan said. "You were in that accident too, right?" She stiffened. "That's not relevant." "It might be." He met her eyes, steady but kind. "People don't freeze like that without a reason." Clara set the cup down. Her hands, delicate yet trembling, betrayed how tightly she held herself together. "She hasn't spoken since that night," she whispered. "Not to me. Not to anyone." Before Ethan could answer, a small voice called from the hallway. "Dad? Is someone here?" Sophie Walker, 9 years old, appeared wearing an oversized hoodie and socks that didn't match. She had her father's eyes, hazel with a hint of curiosity that never quite faded, and light brown hair tied in a crooked ponytail. She was the kind of child who seemed to brighten every room simply by being herself. After her mother's death, she had learned to read silence the way others read books. She gave Clara a polite smile. "Hi, I'm Sophie." Clara crouched slightly to meet her height. Though it was awkward, she wasn't used to children. "Hello, Sophie. You must be very proud of your dad." Sophie grinned. "He's okay, but Rex is the real hero." As if on cue, Rex padded over and rested his head against Sophie's knee. Clara watched him, fascinated by how the big dog became gentle the moment he was near the girl. "May I?" she asked. Ethan nodded, and Clara knelt, brushing her fingers over Rex's fur. The dog stayed still, eyes half closed, as if assessing her. It was the first time in years Clara felt something that wasn't fear or calculation, a strange warmth, the kind that comes from trust freely given. Later that evening, as Clara prepared to leave, she hesitated at the door. "I want to bring you and Rex to my house," she said. "Not officially, privately, to see if it happens again." Ethan hesitated. "Ma'am, I'm on leave. I'm not a therapist." "I'm not asking for therapy," she said. "I'm asking for help." Ethan looked down at Rex, who tilted his head as if agreeing. He sighed. "All right, but no media, no board members, just us. That night, as Ethan closed the door behind her, he found Sophie sitting cross-legged on the couch, watching him. "You like her," she said simply. He laughed. "She's my boss for now." "No," Sophie said, serious. "You looked at her like you used to look at Mom, before the bad thing." Her innocence cut deeper than she knew. Ethan sat beside her, pulling her close. "Some people forget how to smile, sweetheart. Maybe we can help them remember." The next day dawned brighter, the rare winter sunlight washing over the Reynolds estate perched on Queen Anne Hill. The mansion was a blend of glass and steel, its wide windows reflecting the bay below. Ethan arrived in his old SUV with Rex in the back seat. Sophie insisted on coming along, clutching Rex's leash as if she were part of the mission. The housekeeper, Margaret Collins, greeted them at the door. She was in her early 70s, stocky with silver hair tied neatly in a bun and glasses perched low on her nose. Her cardigan was gray, her smile kind but guarded, the sort of woman who'd worked for rich families long enough to know that the warmth often came at a price. "Mrs. Reynolds is waiting in the sunroom," she said, voice gravelly but gentle. "And the little one, she's been awake since dawn." In the sunroom, sunlight spilled through tall glass panes, illuminating Amelia's wheelchair. The girl sat quietly, her eyes fixed on the window where rain still clung to the glass. She didn't turn when the door opened. Clara stood nearby, anxious but composed. Rex approached slowly, his paws making no sound on the marble floor. He stopped beside Amelia, tilting his head. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, softly, Amelia's gaze shifted, not to her mother, but to the reflection of the dog beside her. Her lips parted just slightly, and a tear rolled down her cheek. Clara gasped, stepping forward, but Ethan raised a hand. "Let her lead," he murmured. Rex rested his chin on Amelia's knee. The girl's hand trembled, rising a fraction of an inch before falling again. It wasn't much, but Clara covered her mouth, eyes wet. Ethan crouched beside the dog. "See, buddy, you're doing all the work." For the first time, Clara smiled. Small, fragile, but real. As they left the room, Ethan noticed a framed photo on the wall, Clara and Logan with Amelia, taken years ago. He studied Logan's smile. It looked identical to the one he wore last night, flawless, empty. He wondered what kind of man could make a child's eyes go that cold. Later, as Clara thanked him at the door, a sleek black car pulled up the driveway. Logan Pierce stepped out, expression calm, but his eyes flicked between Ethan and Clara with quiet hostility. "Officer Walker," he said, voice smooth as polished stone, "I see you found a new hobby." Ethan extended a hand. "Just doing what I can." Logan ignored it, turning to Clara. "A police officer and his dog playing therapist? I hope you know what you're doing." Clara's voice hardened. "At least he's helping." Logan smiled thinly. "Careful, darling. Some heroes bite." He glanced at Rex, then back at Ethan, and walked away. Ethan watched him go, uneasy. The man's confidence wasn't that of innocence. It was the calm of someone who believed he couldn't be touched. As the car disappeared down the hill, the winter sun dimmed behind gathering clouds once more. Rex stood beside Ethan, tail low, ears alert. The dog gave a low growl, almost imperceptible, as if sensing what lay ahead. And somewhere inside the house, Amelia's voice, weak but clear, whispered a single word for the first time in a year: Rex. The following week, the skies over Seattle cleared for the first time in months. Sunlight slid across the city's gray skyline, washing over the rooftops and shimmering on the wet pavement. Ethan Walker drove his old SUV up the winding road to Queen Anne Hill again, Rex sitting upright in the back seat, alert as always, while Sophie hummed softly beside him. The radio played a country tune, faint beneath the hum of the engine. Ethan glanced at his daughter, noticing how she seemed lighter these days, perhaps because of Amelia, or perhaps because Rex had found a new purpose that Sophie could share in. "Dad," she said, eyes bright, "do you think Amelia will walk again?" Ethan smiled faintly. "I think people surprise us when we least expect it." At the Reynolds estate, Clara was waiting on the porch. Today she looked different, her gray tailored dress replaced with a soft blue cardigan and jeans. The rigid mask she usually wore in public had softened, though her eyes still carried the sharp alertness of a woman who spent her life balancing risk and reputation. "You're early," she said, smiling faintly. "Rex gets restless if he's not working," Ethan replied. Rex barked once, as if in agreement. Inside, the atmosphere of the house had changed. Where it once felt sterile and silent, there was now life. Flowers on the table, faint music in the background. Margaret Collins, the elderly housekeeper, arranged fresh lilies in a vase. She looked up and nodded warmly at Ethan. "That dog has brought sunshine into this house," she whispered. Amelia sat by the window, wrapped in a cream blanket. The soft morning light made her pale skin glow, and her brown hair shimmered like copper. When Rex entered, her eyes immediately followed him. "Good morning," Ethan greeted softly. Amelia didn't answer, but her lips curved ever so slightly. It was progress. Clara stood behind her daughter, hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the wheelchair. "She slept through the night," she said to Ethan. "That hasn't happened in over a year." Ethan nodded, crouching beside Rex. "We'll keep things quiet today, maybe some light interaction." Sophie walked to the piano in the corner and began playing a gentle tune, a song her mother once loved. The melody floated through the room like a memory. Rex lay near Amelia's feet, tail sweeping across the rug in slow rhythm. Then something subtle happened. Amelia's hand reached down, her fingers brushing through the thick fur. A whisper escaped her lips. "Rex." Clara gasped. Ethan froze, his chest tightening. It wasn't just sound, it was intent. The girl had spoken. "Say it again, sweetheart," Clara urged. But Amelia's voice faded back into silence, her eyes filling with tears. Rex lifted his head and licked her hand gently, as if telling her it was enough. For the first time since his wife's death, Ethan felt the strange ache of hope, raw, unfiltered, terrifying. That afternoon, while Sophie and Amelia drew on sketch pads under Rex's watchful gaze, Clara led Ethan into her study. The room was minimalist, glass walls, steel shelves, no trace of warmth except for a small photograph on her desk. Clara, Amelia, and a smiling man in a tuxedo. "Logan," Ethan murmured, recognizing the face from the gala. Clara's expression hardened. "Yes, my ex-husband. You've met him." Ethan folded his arms. "He doesn't strike me as a man who enjoys losing control." She hesitated, then turned toward the window. "Logan was brilliant once, ruthless but brilliant. He built the foundation that helped fund my research programs. When Amelia was born, I thought, maybe he'd change, but power doesn't change people, it reveals them." Her voice faltered. "After the accident, I found gaps in the company's accounts, money missing. He blamed stress, grief. I wanted to believe him, but something about that night, how quickly he disappeared from the hospital, the way he avoided the police afterward, it never made sense." Ethan listened silently. Years in the force had taught him when to stay quiet. "You think the accident wasn't an accident?" he asked finally. Clara looked over her shoulder, eyes glistening. "I think someone wanted something in that car more than they wanted us to live." Before Ethan could reply, the sound of laughter drew them back to the living room. Sophie had convinced Amelia to color a page of Rex using bold strokes of yellow and brown. Clara's tension broke into a smile at the sight. For the first time, her home felt alive again. That evening, as dusk fell, the four of them, Clara, Ethan, Sophie, and Amelia, walked along the garden path. Rex trotted ahead, ears pricked, tail waving. The scent of wet earth and blooming jasmine filled the air. Clara spoke softly, her voice carrying a vulnerability she rarely showed. "You're good with her, Ethan. She listens to you." "She listens to Rex," he corrected. "He hears what people don't say." Clara looked at him, studying the faint scar along his jaw, the quiet steadiness in his gaze. "And what about you?" He smiled faintly. "I'm just learning to listen, too." They reached the fountain at the end of the path. Sophie and Amelia were tossing flower petals into the water, laughing. For Clara, the sound felt foreign but beautiful. Then her phone buzzed. She stepped aside, glancing at the screen. Her face darkened. "It's Logan," she said quietly. "He wants to see Amelia. Tonight." Ethan's expression hardened. "You think that's a good idea?" "I don't," Clara admitted. "But if I refuse, he'll make a scene. He still holds shares in the company. The board listens to him." Later that night, Logan arrived at the estate. He was immaculate as always, dark suit, silk tie, every detail polished. But his eyes carried a sharp gleam that unsettled Ethan the moment he opened the door. "Officer Walker," Logan greeted smoothly, stepping inside without invitation. "Still volunteering as a dog whisperer?" Ethan didn't reply. Rex stood between them, silent but watchful. Logan's gaze flicked toward the animal, then to Clara. "I just want to see my daughter." In the living room, Amelia sat quietly as Logan approached. His smile was warm but hollow. "Hey, princess," he murmured. "Daddy's here." But Rex growled softly, a low warning. Amelia's hands clenched the armrests, her breathing quickened. Clara stepped forward, alarmed. "Logan, you're scaring her." Logan straightened, irritation flashing across his face. "She's my child, Clara. I have every right to—" "She doesn't want you near her," Ethan cut in, his voice calm but firm. Logan turned, jaw tightening. "Careful, officer. This isn't your jurisdiction." Rex moved closer to Amelia, his body tense. Clara knelt beside her daughter, whispering soothingly. When Logan finally left, his parting words were soft but laced with threat. "Don't forget, Clara. All of this, your house, your company, exists because I allow it to." After the door closed, Ethan turned to her. He shouldn't come near that child again. Clara's hands shook. "He's still on the board. I can't stop him without proof." "Then we find proof," Ethan said quietly. "Whatever happened that night, it's not over." Rex barked once, as if agreeing. Amelia reached down and touched his head again, her small voice breaking the silence. "Rex, safe." The room stilled. Clara covered her mouth, tears streaming silently. Ethan met her eyes, and in that moment, both understood. The past had begun to speak through the child who could not forget. Outside, the wind rose, sweeping through the pines. The night over Seattle thickened with the weight of what was coming. Seattle's winter light had a strange quality, pale, cautious, and distant, as if the sun itself feared to touch the city. Days after Logan's tense visit, the Reynolds estate had grown quieter, but not peaceful. Clara felt it in the walls, in the way Amelia startled at sudden sounds, in the flicker of lights that seemed to echo her own unease. Ethan and Rex came daily now, under the guise of informal sessions, though everyone knew the truth. They were no longer simply helping a child heal. They were uncovering something buried far deeper. Ethan stood in the sunroom that morning, coffee mug in hand, watching Amelia draw. The girl's concentration was extraordinary for someone her age. Her hands moved slowly but deliberately across the page, tracing shapes that seemed both random and deliberate, circles, lines, shattered forms. When she was done, she held up her work. Ethan tilted his head. "That's a car," he said softly. Amelia nodded once. "Fire," she whispered, and pointed to the streaks of red near the corner. Clara froze beside her. It was the first time Amelia had voluntarily drawn anything connected to the accident. Rex sat nearby, ears alert, his golden eyes following the pencil as if trying to decode the meaning himself. Sophie sat cross-legged on the rug, coloring beside Amelia. She leaned over, whispering gently, "You're really good at drawing." Amelia gave her a shy, almost invisible smile. To see her smile at all felt like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. That afternoon, Clara invited Ethan to her office downtown. It was a sleek glass tower overlooking Elliott Bay, all chrome and efficiency, the empire she had built from ambition and loss. "You need to see this," she said, leading him into a secured conference room. On the table sat a thin stack of documents and a flash drive. "These are from the company's financial archives. Margaret found them while sorting old files." Ethan examined the papers. They detailed financial transfers from the Reynolds Foundation to several shell corporations. The signatures were Logan's. "These dates," Ethan said slowly, "they're around the same time as the crash." Clara nodded. "I believe the crash wasn't random. Logan was supposed to deliver these documents to federal auditors. Instead, he diverted them. And that night, he insisted we drive the company prototype car. I thought it was pride. Now I wonder if it was sabotage." Ethan's mind turned sharply. "You think he used the accident to destroy evidence?" Her voice broke. "I think he used us." Before Ethan could answer, a knock sounded at the glass door. It was Rachel Moore, a detective from the Seattle PD Internal Division. She was in her late 30s, with auburn hair tied into a tight bun and sharp gray eyes that gave away nothing. "Captain Simmons said you might need a hand walker," she said, stepping in. She was one of the few people Ethan still trusted, direct, methodical, with a sense of justice uncorrupted by politics. She'd once investigated a corruption case that nearly cost her career. If Logan Pierce is laundering through charity fronts, she continued, he's not doing it alone. He's got backing from inside the city's finance board. Clara frowned. You can prove it? Maybe, Rachel said, but I'll need access to the original Foundation servers. No leaks, no lawyers. Clara hesitated. The servers were under tight surveillance, their data encrypted beyond civilian reach. But if what Rachel said was true, silence could mean complicity. I'll arrange it, Clara finally said. That evening, as dusk turned the skyline bronze, Ethan returned to the estate. Rex padded alongside him, alert. The air smelled faintly of rain and cedar. Inside, Margaret met him at the door, her face pale. She's having another nightmare, the old woman said quietly. The little one. She keeps calling for her mother, but when I go near, she screams. Ethan rushed upstairs. In Amelia's room, the lights were dim. The girl was thrashing under the covers, whispering something incoherent. Lights, water, Daddy, no. Rex jumped onto the bed, curling against her side. His low, steady breathing filled the room. Slowly, her movements calmed. Clara stood at the doorway, tears streaking her face. This happens every night, she whispered. Always around the same time. I can't take it anymore. Ethan touched her shoulder gently. She's remembering. It's painful, but it's progress. Clara looked at him, eyes hollow. Progress feels like punishment. Downstairs, after Amelia slept, Sophie sat at the kitchen table with a mug of cocoa, chatting quietly with Margaret. Miss Clara's really brave, Sophie said. She just looks scared sometimes. Margaret smiled sadly. People who carry the most power often carry the heaviest ghosts. Just then, headlights swept across the window. Ethan tensed, hand instinctively reaching for his badge. A dark car idled at the gate. He stepped outside, raincoat over his shoulders. The driver's window rolled down, revealing Julian J. Thorne, a tall man in his late 40s with slick gray hair and a crisp navy suit. His cold smile didn't reach his eyes. Evening, officer, he said smoothly. I'm here on behalf of Mr. Pierce. He's requesting cooperation in ongoing asset reviews. Ethan's jaw tightened. This is private property. You'll need a warrant. Jay chuckled. Oh, I have something better. He flashed a document, a court order granting Logan partial access to the Foundation's financial archives. Seems Mrs. Reynolds forgot who still sits on her board. Inside, Clara's face drained of color as Ethan handed her the paper. He's tightening control, she murmured. He knows we're looking. Ethan nodded grimly. He's making a move before we can expose him. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Ethan stood alone in the study. The rain had started again, tapping softly against the glass. He turned on his laptop and began cross-checking the Foundation's accounts. The deeper he dug, the stranger it became. There were encrypted files labeled Project Halo, all tied to government contracts, none authorized under Clara's signature. He printed a few pages and slipped them into his jacket. Behind him, Rex gave a soft bark. The dog stood near the window, staring into the darkness outside. Ethan approached and saw a movement near the gate, a figure, quickly retreating into the rain. A tall man wearing a hat, watching. He called softly, Rex, stay. The dog obeyed, muscles tense. Ethan stepped outside, flashlight cutting through the mist. The figure was gone. Only tire tracks remained in the mud. When he returned inside, Clara was waiting at the foot of the stairs, wrapped in a robe. Her face was pale, her hair loose, eyes wide with sleepless fear. Someone was out there, wasn't there? Ethan nodded. They're watching, probably Logan's men. Clara looked toward Amelia's room. Then we have to move faster. He hesitated. If we keep digging, it's going to get dangerous. For you, for your daughter. Clara's voice trembled, but held steady. Danger started the moment I believed in him. I won't let him destroy her too. Rex came over, resting his head against Clara's hand. She knelt, stroking his fur, tears falling silently. He's not just protecting her, she whispered. He's protecting what's left of me. Ethan looked down at them both. The broken mother, the haunted child upstairs, and the loyal dog who seemed to understand every unspoken truth. Something inside him hardened. Then we fight smart, he said. Tomorrow, we go public. But as the rain fell heavier outside, Ethan's phone buzzed with a message from Captain Simmons. Walker, be careful. Pierce's name just disappeared from the city's investigation log. The message ended with a line that made Ethan's blood run cold. Someone inside erased him. He looked toward the window where Rex stood guard, the dog's reflection sharp against the lightning-lit glass. "Looks like we just stepped into something bigger, partner," he murmured. Rex's tail flicked once, slow and deliberate, the silent acknowledgement of a soldier ready for war. The next morning arrived heavy with fog, draping Seattle in a shroud of uncertainty. The air was cold and metallic, the kind that clung to skin and whispered that something was about to change. Ethan Walker hadn't slept. The events of the previous night replayed in his mind. The figure in the rain, the erased records, the court order that gave Logan Pierce access to Clara's world again. The city outside his window looked ordinary, but Ethan had been a cop long enough to know danger hid best in routine. By 8 o'clock, he was back at the Reynolds estate. The fog rolled low over the hedges, swallowing the morning light. Rex walked beside him, alert and quiet, his amber eyes reflecting the gray dawn. Inside, the house felt subdued. Margaret Collins moved through the kitchen with a worried frown, her usual calm replaced with nervous energy. "There's been a call," she whispered, "from a man asking if Miss Clara will be attending the Foundation's evening reception tonight. He didn't give a name." Ethan's jaw tightened. Logan. Clara appeared moments later, dressed sharply in a charcoal blazer and white blouse, her expression controlled but tense. "It's a mandatory board appearance," she said before he could speak. "If I don't show up, Logan wins control of the Foundation vote." Ethan frowned. "And if you do show up," she met his gaze steadily, "then I'll see what he's planning." And ended. Upstairs, Amelia was sitting by the window, sketching again. Sophie sat beside her, reading aloud from an old children's book about knights and dragons. The two girls had grown close, bound by innocence and shared pain. When Sophie noticed Ethan at the door, she whispered, "She slept through the night. No nightmares." Amelia nodded faintly, still drawing. The picture this time showed a bridge, a broken car, and a shadow standing nearby, tall, faceless, watching. Rex whined softly, lowering his head beside the girl. Ethan knelt next to her and asked quietly, "Amelia, who's that man?" The pencil in her hand trembled. "The one who took Mommy's phone," she whispered. Clara froze at the doorway, her face turning pale. "Her phone disappeared after the crash," she said, voice shaking. "It contained everything. The board contracts, Logan's private messages. We thought it burned in the wreck." Ethan exhaled slowly. "If that phone still exists, it's the key to everything." That afternoon, Clara prepared for the Foundation event. Ethan insisted on accompanying her, officially as her security detail, unofficially as her conscience. Rex rode along in the back of the SUV, restless. Sophie stayed with Margaret, promising to look after Amelia. The girl had started to draw again, something bright this time. Rex standing in a field of flowers, tail wagging under the sun. Margaret watched her with tears in her eyes. Downtown, the Foundation's gala hall gleamed under white lights. It was a grand place, marble floors, mirrored walls, and crystal chandeliers that sparkled like trapped stars. Clara stepped out of the car with poise that masked her anxiety. She was greeted immediately by journalists, flashing cameras, and polite applause. Logan was already there, of course, immaculate in his black tuxedo, every hair perfectly in place. His smile was thin, rehearsed. "Clara?" he said warmly, kissing the air beside her cheek. "You look radiant. I was worried you might skip our little celebration." "I wouldn't give you that satisfaction," she replied coolly. Ethan stood nearby, his uniform blending with the hired security, eyes scanning the room. Rachel Moore, the detective from Internal Affairs, was also present in disguise, wearing a simple navy gown, her auburn hair loose for once. She nodded slightly at Ethan from across the hall, signaling she had begun tapping into the gala's internal network. As the evening unfolded, Logan took the stage. He spoke eloquently about charity, innovation, and progress, but Ethan noticed something else. The security guards at each exit wore no Foundation insignia, private hires, probably his men. Rex growled softly, ears twitching. Something was wrong. Meanwhile, back at the Reynolds estate, Margaret tucked Amelia into bed. Sophie sat by the window, watching the fog roll across the garden. Then, faintly, she heard footsteps outside. Slow, deliberate. "Margaret?" she whispered. The older woman looked up, frowning. "Stay here, dear." She walked toward the front door, her steps hesitant. The doorbell rang once, long and shrill. When she opened it, There was no one, only an envelope on the mat, sealed in black wax. Inside was a phone, burned at the edges, screen cracked, but still functional. Margaret gasped. "Oh, Lord." Back at the gala, Ethan's phone buzzes. A message from Sophie flashed across the screen. "Dad, there's a phone. I think it's hers." His pulse quickened. He turned to Clara, murmuring under his breath, "We found it." Before she could respond, Logan's voice echoed across the hall. "And now, a special announcement. Tonight marks a new partnership between Reynolds Robotics and Pierce Holdings, a merger that will redefine the future." The crowd applauded, but Clara froze. "He's selling the company," she whispered, "without authorization." Ethan moved fast. He pulled out his radio. "Rachel, cut the feed. He's about to launder this through public record." Rachel's voice came back, tense. "On it." Suddenly, one of Logan's hired guards stepped forward, intercepting Ethan. The man was tall, muscular, with a shaved head and the cold efficiency of a professional enforcer. "Mr. Pierce doesn't like interruptions," he said. Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Tell him I don't take requests." The guard smirked, just before Rex lunged. The German Shepherd's bark tore through the room like thunder, sending the crowd screaming. Cameras flashed, chaos erupted. Ethan shoved past the guard and sprinted toward the stage. Logan turned, startled but defiant. "You can't stop this, Walker. Everything you have is already under my name." Clara stepped up beside Ethan, fury burning through her fear. "Not everything." She pulled out her phone, connecting to the video feed Margaret had just sent, the recovered phone's data streaming to the main screen behind Logan. Texts appeared for all to see. "Transfer the files tonight. No one can know. Clara suspects. Handle it. If the car fails, make it look accidental." Gasps rippled through the audience. Reporters turned their cameras on Logan, who stood frozen, face drained of color. "That's fake," he shouted, but Rachel stepped forward, badge in hand. "It's not, and you're under arrest." Logan tried to run. Rex intercepted him first, teeth bared, forcing him down as officers swarmed in. The chandelier above flickered with the flashes of police lights and camera flashes. Ethan caught Clara's arm as she swayed, overwhelmed. "It's over," he said softly. She looked at him, tears in her eyes. "No," she whispered, smiling faintly. "It's beginning." Later that night, when they returned home, Amelia was awake, waiting. She looked at her mother and asked, clearly for the first time, "Mommy, is it safe now?" Clara knelt, holding her tightly. "Yes, baby, it's safe." Rex sat beside them, tail thumping quietly, as if to confirm it. The fog began to lift outside, revealing the first stirs over the bay. Small, trembling, but unmistakably real. Sometimes miracles do not come from thunder or fire, but from quiet acts of courage. A hand reaching out, a loyal dog standing guard, a child daring to speak again. What happened to Clara, Ethan, and little Amelia reminds us that faith often hides in the smallest moments, the ones we almost overlook. When all seemed lost, love became their miracle, and through it, they found healing that only God could have written. In our own lives, we may walk through fog and fear, but if we hold on to kindness, protect the innocent, and never stop believing in grace, light will always find its way through. Just like Rex, loyal, brave, and guided by something greater, we too can become instruments of hope for others. If this story touched your heart, please share it to remind someone that love still conquers fear. Comment below your thoughts. Tell us how this story moved you, and type amen if you believe that God still works miracles in everyday life. Pray for healing, for families to be reunited, and for every broken soul to find peace again. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. So, together we can spread more stories of faith, love, and redemption. May God bless you and your family always. Amen.